In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to build an awesome $1,500 gaming PC that literally slaps for 1440p gaming. A system that takes advantage of Nvidia's hugely popular 4070 Super, a stunning all-white colour scheme, and should be pretty easy to put together. I'm going to walk you through all the parts, the full build process, and those all-important frame rate numbers in all the most popular titles a little later on. Let's do this. Today's video has been made possible by GeekaPC, our PC building business. If you're based in the UK and looking to pick up one of the systems featured right here on the channel, you can now do just that. We may not be the cheapest, but we use high quality components throughout with configurable RAM, storage, and GPU options. Learn more at the first links in the description below. I'm going to start today's video by talking about the GPU choice, because in any price point, what graphics card you pick can be a very controversial subject, trust me. I've learned that one the hard way. Now, typically for this price point, I might have gone for the RX 7900 GRE, but I know a lot of you guys prefer to go Nvidia for some of those Nvidia exclusive features. And while this card does have less VRAM than its AMD counterpart, the 12 gigs on this card, by the way, is still sufficient for 1440p in my opinion, and slightly lower rasterization performance, you do get the advantage of DLSS, which is better than AMD FSR, and Nvidia FrameGen, which is better than its AMD alternative. Now this is going to pair up really well for 1440p gaming with the AMD Ryzen 5 9600X. Again, you might be thinking, why have you gone for this and not, say, the cheaper 7600X? And at the launch of AMD's Ryzen 9000 chips, I would have agreed with that stance. But on Newegg right now, you can find this for under $250, which is significantly lower than its launch MSRP, and it's actually getting closer and closer to the 7600X as far as price parity is concerned. Versus the last gen chip, it's going to give you slightly better power efficiency, slightly better performance, but nothing that's going to rock the world as far as frame rate upside goes. But then again, a bit more free performance never hurt anyone. RAM and SSD is super simple for me. If you've watched our builds this year, these will be no surprise. The Team Group T-Force Delta RGB DDR5. This is a beautiful white kit with a nice fast 6400 MHz and low latency. SSD is the MP44L. Not sponsored by Team Group, by the way. I actually bought both of these. This is a really nice entry-level Gen 4 NVMe that's good not just for builds like this, but even going slightly higher end, a 70 Ti Super, 7900 XT, this is going to be more than quick enough. The truth is, Gen 4 SSDs have got so fast and so cheap, there's really no need to spend a lot of money. Let's talk about the motherboard, shall we? Because again, this may seem like a little bit of an unusual choice. It's the MSI X870-P Wi-Fi. Now you might think, James, top-end X870's chipset, why have you done that? B850 motherboards aren't here yet. We're expecting them at CES in the new year. However, this is actually pretty close price-wise to the current lineup of B650 boards and avoids us having to do a BIOS update, which, while not particularly difficult, is another step in the build today. Of course, we get the added X870 features too. You may find it's worthwhile holding out for those next generation B850 motherboards, but for now, this is a good interim solution and is going to give us those fancy Ryzen 9000 connectivity features, like more widespread PCI Gen 5 support for SSDs and PCI slots. Something you may find becomes more useful when those next-gen GPUs launch, again expected at CES in the new year. Let's talk briefly about the case for this build as well. This is the Phanteks XT View. This is the white one. I've built in the black one previously, and you probably will recognize this sort of style of case from a lot of cases out there right now. The Montage XR is a good example. The Corsair 3500 is a nice case, but that's quite expensive. This has price on its side. It's highly affordable, still boasts a fantastic Phanteks build quality, and I like that on the white one, it's a fully clear panel, so no tinting, you can see inside without any issues. The attention to detail is also really good, and there's a few things that more expensive cases get wrong that Phanteks have got right. Even things like silver screws just accent the white a lot better. We have loads of mesh ventilation down here, giving the PSU and whole system a little more room to breathe. And if I pull off the rear panel, you'll even see that the front panel cables, all the fan cables, if I can get this off. There we go, it's built so well I can't actually remove the rear panel. All of the cables and stuff included, other than this rogue black cable tie here and here, are actually white, so that's going to match the build great. There's nothing that infuriates me more than a white case with black cables or black connectors on the cables. Fully white, going to match the colour scheme so much better. I should mention power at this stage as well. This is the MSI A750 G-Out PCI 5. You might be thinking, James, this is black and you just talked about how you don't like black cables. Wow, I have got some really nice white PCI PSU extensions, including a 24-pin motherboard, CPU, but also the next-gen 16-pin compact GPU power. I'll link this extension from Easy DIY Fab and everything mentioned today at the affiliate links in the description below. These PCI extension cables in particular can be really difficult to get hold of and actually to find on Amazon and other stores. So glad I picked this up, and I think it's going to make a big difference. I'm going to start things off by installing the CPU into the motherboard, followed by the memory in the second and fourth RAM DIMM slots, and using the really easy toolless M.2 slot at the top, adding our MP44L for good measure. I am also going to add some brackets onto the cooler at this stage. These right here are the AMD brackets. I have gone for an AIO, which is a little splurgy. This is probably a slightly more expensive way to do this build, but let's face it, if you wanted to do it cheaply, you'd probably go for the AMD GPU and pick up a budget air cooler instead. I think an AIO adds a lot to a build, and this case is a little fan light, meaning this E360 will be a great fit. I have as well added the plastic AMD stock brackets back onto my motherboard, as I previously took them off. If you're building this system from scratch, you can skip this step as they'll come pre-installed. The next stage of the build is to pop the motherboard into place, and using my fancy James cam, I can show you exactly where all the standoffs are. You can see there are 3 at the top of the case, 3 along the middle, and 3 down the bottom, and these should relate to the 9 standoff hole locations on the motherboard. The screws and stuff you need to secure the board down come included at the rear of the case in this little accessory box. Go ahead and slide the motherboard in, fasten all the screws into place. No IO shield to worry about, as of course they are built in nowadays, which is a nice time saver and gets rid of a little bit of hassle. That's in and looking pretty good. Obviously the board is black, but the silver accents, the white memory, and of course the white GPU should tie the whole thing in quite nicely together. I'm next going to pop the cooler in. It's got room for a 360, as you can see at the top. So I'm going to remove the top dust filter and then screw the radiator in and all the fans. Make sure to pop the fans on the rad before putting the rad into the case. Then it's a case of adding a dab of thermal paste and securing the CPU water block into place. Nice and easy. I'm going to cable and wire this up a little bit later on. Now at this stage of any build, I always say I'd much rather do the GPU, but don't do it. Do the power supply, make your life easier, get the cabling and wiring out the way now, and then installing the GPU is going to be a lot easier later. I'm going to install the motherboard, CPU, GPU, and a SATA power connection. The SATA is for any RGB controllers or anything like that we might want to plug in. Screw this into the rear of the case and then add our PSU extensions in. As I said earlier, these are from Easy DIY Fab, and I'll link them alongside everything for latest part pricing and availability in the description below. Get those cables wired up to the top left, the right hand side, and of course save the GPU until later, and then go ahead and complete all of the front panel cables, so your JFP one to the bottom right, USB 3 Type A and Type C, and the HD audio port which plugs up to the bottom left of the motherboard. Nice and easy. And then the GPU can finally go into place. Super excited about this one, and I think that it's going to fit the theme of the build absolutely perfectly. Look at that. Oh yeah, baby. I've actually just ordered a white Sapphire 7800 XT. I missed out on a white 7900 GRE during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But if you'd like to see me do a slightly cheaper $1,200 build thereabouts with the white 7800 XT, let me know down in the comments below. And of course, if you wanted to, you could sub this out for a white 800 XT or 900 GRE. They're probably the 2 closest match on the AMD side of the equation. That's unless, of course, MSI return to making GPUs for AMD, which I kind of really hope they do. Now then, sliding this into place. That looks pretty good. GPU power cable, yes. And of course, the same thumb screws I just removed to fasten the card in, and make sure it's not gonna go anywhere. Get that nice and tight. Hold the card up a little bit as you do this, just to help prevent GPU sag. And you can see the cable has its own little grommet at the bottom of the case. What do you guys think of this build? As you can see, I've got a bit of cable management to do, and I'll rejoin you once that's all sorted to check out performance and see how good this thing looks when it's all powered up. Looking really good. Now, I've done a lot of white builds recently. I'm not exactly sure what's my favorite, but I think this has to be up there. Now, I'm gonna walk through all the performance figures one by one, starting with the highest frame rate and working through to the lowest. And for all the testing today, I'll be using MSI's slightly overkill 321 URX. It's a beautiful QD OLED monitor, which you can see behind me. Let's begin, shall we, with Fortnite, which it's no surprise to see this top the charts on the frame rate front. At 1080p competitive settings on this build, I managed to just about break through the 300 FPS mark on on average, giving 301 frames per second all told. Apex Legends actually wasn't too far behind, which is kind of surprising considering this was running at 1440p, so a higher resolution, and on the high preset. Here we managed to pull in 275 frames per second on average, and as you can see from the gameplay, it's really smooth, there's very minimal frame rate drops, the whole thing looks really fantastic, and I have to say at 1440p this system is a bit of a beast. In Cyberpunk 2077 we upped the ante by sticking with the 1440p high preset, but turning on DLSS at the quality preset and ray tracing at set to high. Here the system did actually way better than I would have expected, with 126 frames per second on average. That just goes to show those of you who are looking maybe for a reason to go Nvidia, this would be one of them. The ray tracing performance is far superior to what you're going to find on an AMD card at this price point, and that makes games like Cyberpunk look absolutely out of this world. Again, not going to be important for everyone, but for those of you who it is, definitely worth bearing in mind. In Call of Duty's Black Ops 6, frame rates were really good too, again at 1440p high settings, with the build achieving 121 frames per second on average. Hogwarts Legacy at 1440p high performed well too, again breaking through the 100 FPS mark with 111 frames per second. It's almost like 100 frames is the new 60, while Alan Wake 2 carried on the trend with just over 100 FPS, 107 frames per second all told at that 1440p high preset. In fact, Black Myth Wukong was actually the only game where we didn't break through the 100 FPS mark, just about saving off at the 60 frames per second point, with 62 frames per second all told at 1440p high settings. This is a build that really performs well in all the latest titles and is a bit of a monster at 1440p. And while we are expecting new GPUs to land in the new year, potentially a 70 SKU as early as January or February, it's interesting to see the performance on offer from the 4070 Super. And it's a card that, as it continues to drop in price, just becomes better and better value. You can find all the components mentioned today linked in the description below for latest pricing and availability. Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one. Yeah.